First speaker is Max Samorukov. Please, Max, just help me if I'm mispronouncing your name. Anyway, his company is AppMagic, and Max is going to share a lot about the data insights that he has in this talk, building your product strategy based on market research. Max, whenever you're ready.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, great. So ready to go? I'm going to share my screen now. Give me a sec. Okay, this one. So today, today I want to talk about building a product strategy for a mobile gaming company. And an important thing that you not only build your product strategy on the early days of your company. The market is constantly evolving and you need to update your product strategy constantly. And sometimes you need to completely revise your own one. If it fails, you succeed. I'll start with pretty basic stuff and then we will go deeper. So one of the first things to do is to figure out at what game genres you have solid expertise in. Having relevant expertise is definitely a powerful advantage because you're able to predict your development and operating expenses accurate enough. You know how to recruit and lead a team that matches the genre of your choice. You know how to buy traffic for games of the genre. You know you're well equipped with understanding how to come up with a proper game balance and proper feature set. In other words, having relevant expertise can help you dramatically cut business risks. But what if you don't have this relevant expertise? There are two obvious ways for you. First is to go and buy this expertise by means of recruiting specialists who do have it, or you can choose to generate this expertise on your own. And in this case, it will be wise for you to start with products with short development life cycle and low development costs, because you need to learn as fast as possible. And to do that, you need to trade your money and time for experience with the best possible ratio. Another thing to do is to figure out, to make up your mind on what kind of market niche you prefer, a narrow or broad one, and what's more beneficial for you, to copy or to innovate. Conventional definition of a broad market niche usually refers market niches with broad target audience. But I think that a little bit more handy way to define a broad market niche as the one that is represented by a lot of highly successful titles. And talking about the niche, I'm not only implying game genres, but only settings, complexity of metagame, and even art style. Why is it more handy? Because it's easier for you to take any market intelligence tool and then go and check successful apps of any genre, and then do quantitative analysis. Broad market niches are definitely highly competitive, and they are usually called red oceans. If you choose to go for one, you need to be very clear on what exactly is going to help you to successfully fight the competition. Are you going to come up with innovative monetization or metagame that will help you achieve better monetization and better LTV, and then by means of that to be able to buy buy traffic with better ROI than the others? Do you know how to are you going to come up with a feature that will help you achieve incredible retention? What is that you know or can that will help you successfully fight the competition? Actually, all the same is applicable to narrow market niches, but if you go for one, it will be much harder for you to hit the top charts. But even if you are not eager to earn millions of dollars and you just an obsessed visionary who is going to develop a game you've always dreamt of, you still need to be very clear on how exactly you're going to get ROI positive traffic enough to cover your development and operating costs and bring you some profit on top of it. Usually, developers go for one of the following approaches. First, to pick a game genre, a successful and attractive game, a core mechanic, and like complement it with a complex metagame or monetization to achieve better LTV. The game you see here on the screen is Ark Knights, a Japanese tower defense game mixed with complex metagame from butlers. And this approach helped them to achieve great LTV. And this game is generating about $12 million a month, which is an outstanding result for a tower defense game. Another way is to find a game that is pretty successful, but still has some explicit flaws. The game you see on the screen is Random Dice, a game by a Korean developer, 111%. It's also a tower defense game at its core, but the core game is mixed with the merge mechanic. And dices here act like towers, and you can merge them and improve them, and that's actually the innovation. And also they came up with a PvP mode, 1 versus 1. And this game is doing actually really good. It's generating about $8 million revenue monthly. So I know several companies now who are working on similar games, but their idea is to make this game much easier to grasp for new players and to make it look nicer, because this game is actually looks a little bit like a prototype, isn't it? So that's their strategy is to achieve better retention, and that's actually the core idea. And the next way is just to copy a successful existing game and leverage huge amount of resources at your disposal if you have them. So what you see on the slide is a well-known game, Matchington Mansion, that is set to be run by AppLovin, that not only has huge amount of money, but also knows a lot about users' behavior and their payment activities. What I'm about to share with you now is an idea that is quite new for me as well. It came to my mind in a conversation with a friend of mine who runs a game development studio. And I was super impressed by the development KPIs they had. They have a KPI of developing a game in a month with a team of 5 to 8 people. And I'm not talking hyper casual here. We're talking about casual games with some meta game and multiplayer gameplay. And I was questioning him about how is it actually possible to do that. And we ended up with understanding that one of the cornerstones of their corporate culture is so-called rapid development. So rapid development is a development paradigm when all the team is strictly focused on developing the product to the market as soon as possible. It's not the same than MVP, but it's a complete product, but they are focused on cutting away everything that is not strictly necessary, both in terms of product and product development. Conventional development, in comparison, usually comes with well-thought code architecture. They implement a lot of A/B tests. They run a lot of they do a lot of they document they code really well. They do code reviews, so on and so forth, and it all takes time. And I'm not saying that conventional development is worse than rapid development. These approaches are good for different types of products. Conventional development is good for large products with long development life cycle, with large teams, and rapid development is good for smaller products and for doing prototypes. The problem is that you cannot ask your team to switch from one development paradigm to another. It's a kind of a DNA. It's the way that people think. Usually it starts from your lead technical guy who takes a part into recruitment and who builds the development pipeline in your company. And usually you end up with having the whole team of the players of the same kind. So what I'm trying to say here is that you need to take the development culture in your company into consideration while working on the product strategy for your company. Not that long ago, I delivered a whole speech dedicated to hidden dangers of developing mid-core and hardcore games, and today I just do a quick recap. So I selected top 10,000 of successful games according to their revenue within the last 30 days And on this graph, each dot stands for a game, and the size of each dot stands for its revenue within the last 30 days. And the X position of each dot stands for its LTV. Colored rectangles highlight the areas between the 25th and the 75th percentile of the LTV distribution. So you can easily identify the game genres with a very high LTV across games of the genre. These are turn-based RPGs, slots, action RPGs, and forex strategies. So if you have a look at each game of a successful game of the genre, you'll figure out that all these games have huge amount of content and meta game, and you just cannot get by with relatively small development budget. So many developers have made they really highly underestimate the costs and difficulty of development games of midcore and hardcore genres. And the problem is that it's gonna take you several years before you actually realize the mistakes you made, and you may turn out to be unable to correct these mistakes. It will be too late. And that's what I meant when I was talking about that you need to iterate fast to learn, because when it comes to midcore games, it's gonna take you years before you actually iterate and gain the necessary experience. It takes too much your own lifetime and both money. Another problem with these games is that it's gonna take you a lot of money to run proper A/B tests, because when you do a mid-game change or end-game changes, you need a lot of paying users with long lifetime, and considering the cost of CPI gonna cost you a lot for around each A/B test to get statistically significant results. And also, it's gonna take a lot of time because you need to figure out the long-lasting consequences of the mid-game changes you make. Another problem is that when it comes to game genres with high average LTV across games of the genre, they usually the audience usually has very high lifetime for paying users, and it leads to significant difficulties for ROI estimations, and it may lead to significant money losses on user acquisition. Another thing to consider is that these game genres are characterized by really comparably low based on return on investment into user acquisition. I'll talk about it a little bit later. So what I'm going to say here is that if you choose to pick a genre of the kind, you'd better have a really solid experience in all aspects of development and operating games of the kind. Now let's talk about the pace on return in user acquisition. So on the graph of the left, you see two curves, and that represent two imaginary games that have a totally equal LTV, but the second curve, the red one, is just stretched across the x-axis. So the only difference with these games that in the first case, you're gonna get 150% ROI in 60 days, and in the second case in 12 months. And on the graph on the right, you see how your ability to scale your user acquisition budget will differ in these cases. So in the first case, you'll be able to scale user acquisition by means of reinvesting your profit back into user acquisition much faster. In both cases, you'll be more than welcome to talk to the companies who can help you with borrowed capital, such as Xsola, GetBravo, Tilting Point, or MRGV. But in the first case, it will be much easier for you to get these borrowed funds, and you will be able to get more funds because the pace on return is a factor that these companies consider, and also the pace on return affects the ease of predictability of your scaling model. Another thing to consider is to figure out if the market niche you're heading to is actually friendly to newcomers, to new players. So if you have a look at the graph on the left top corner, the blue line represents the cumulative revenue of all match-3 games monthly. And the red line represents the cumulative revenue of all match-3 games that have been published less than 12 months ago. So you see that the share of new games is very, very low. It's a bad sign. It means that the market does not accept new players. And if you have a look at the other graphs, for example, downloads for hyper-casual games, you see that new games are generating about 80% of downloads, of cumulative downloads of the genre. But it's kind of obvious because hyper-casual games have very short life cycle. Okay, let's have a look at the graphs for racing or games or for FPS games. So you see that nearly half of the downloads of FPS market segment is being generated by new games. But then you need to ask yourself, what games make up the vast majority of this red area? Isn't it just one game, say Call of Duty, that generate the vast majority of these downloads? So now let's build other graphs. So in each of these graphs, you see a top 100 games of each genre. And you see that markets for FPS games or racing games or hyper-casual games are pretty diverse. And there are a lot of new players who manage to fight for a significant share of the market. But when it comes to the market for match-3 games, you see that nearly 70% of the revenue of the market segment is being generated by just 5 games that are published just by 2 publishers. And it shows that the market is monopolized, and it's not a good sign for new players. We see that it's very hard for new players to fight for a significant market share. Another good thing to do is to always stay aware of new successful products in your market niche that made it to the top charts and who managed to fight with the existing market leaders. So what you see is a tool that we have at AppMagic. So here you can specify the time frame, the region, the platform, and the tag. So you can choose the tag of a genre, the tag of a setting, or an art style. And then always stay aware of the fastest growing games within the market segment. And if you download these games and play them and try to figure out what in particular helps these games to make it to the top charts, it will really help your existing products. That's actually all I had to say. So thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me.
All right, Max, great. Thanks so much. Well, there are quite a few questions that came in during your session. I see a lot of these questions are actually about very specific data that you presented. So we might want to go back to a few slides that these are applicable to. So for example, the first question that came in kind of at the beginning of your presentation was, can you type the name of the Japanese and Korean games that you mentioned? Because people are very interested in those.
You can give me a sec, so it's...
All right.
Give me a sec, I'm gonna check if the spelling is correct. Yeah, that's it.
All right, great. Then someone was also wondering, you mentioned the studio doing rapid game development of 1 game per month. Can you share what studio does that?
I'm not sure, actually. I've talked with the guy when we discussed that I was going to mention him in my speech, but no, he didn't accept
all right.
mentioning him.
I guess it's always worth to ask, right? Also, another attendee was wondering, where do you get your data from and how do you know it is trustworthy?
Well, like any other service of the kind, they work in a similar way. So we have top charts, which are publicly accessible. And also each customer of ours has an option to share their publisher data with us. We only ask for exact numbers for revenue and downloads. And then we build a math model. It's very complicated stuff, but it works. So we can check with our data. So what in our site, we have an article that is called a essentials of working with AppMagic. And the first chapter covers the accuracy, how to understand accuracy. I know that many people who work with similar services, they think that you cannot believe the estimations you see. Actually, the truth is sometimes there can be some anomalies, but in the vast majority of cases you can believe it, and the average discrepancy can be like maybe 10%. But it can be worse when it comes to the topmost games like #1 or #2, because they are hard to predict, and also the accuracy goes down when it comes to bottom performance. So if you earn $10,000 a month, the discrepancy becomes higher than the value itself.
All right, good. And then there were some questions about your platform and what you showed of that. Someone was asking, how can we plot all versus new for the other game genres?
So what I did, I just go to top charts, selected like addressed the market niche of the interest, and then I just selected like top 100 apps, added it to the app comparison dashboard. It's a tool that we have on our site. So we can add any number of apps up to 100 to a single dashboard, see like what it looks like, and then you can download a CSV. So that's what I've done to build this kind of graph. But actually, we're going to roll out a new tool in a couple of weeks to allow you to build these stacked area graphs right on the site.
All right. And I guess the follow-up question to that is, does all versus new include ad revenue?
No, unfortunately not. We have we don't have an accurate tool to estimate the ad revenue, unfortunately. Actually, as far as I know, no other tool can. But we do have some estimation based on the amount of downloads.
All right, right here. Well, that was all the questions that we got during your talk. Yeah, I guess if people have more questions, they can always reach out to you directly, right?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, wait, it feels there's someone else coming in with a question right now. They're saying, it feels like the mobile gaming sphere is dominated by business models decisions. Is there room in the mobile environment for games to be successful, at least critically, purely on its own merits?
So actually, like, market accepts all types of experiments. What I was trying to show here is like a statistically based approach. So is there a statistically based approach to find like more friendly market segment? But definitely there are a lot of successful products that went against all statistics. And these are the companies we all know. For example, take Supercell, that put that you need to experiment, to do brave experiments and to create market segments. Definitely that can work, but the chances are much worse. It can be very good for you if you have a huge amount of resources at your disposal. And there are a lot of modern tools such as RTB. I'm not talking about the ad revenue part. I'm talking about the demand side part. When you are able to target on users that you know, like what games they like and do they pay or not. And these tools are acceptable to large players, and they have really significant benefits compared to small companies.
All right, thanks. Yeah, good insights for sure. Well, no new questions came in so far, so I guess it's about time that we can. Let me just click. I want more. They keep coming. Someone is asking, how does your tool help indies?
Well, the thing I made most often is that indie game developers are obsessed with their ideas. Like they see a clear picture of the game they're going to develop, and they feel it's going to be a great game, and so on and so forth. And the problem is that in most of the cases, these developers just don't do any appropriate market analysis. Sometimes you are going to develop a game, but if you check the market, you see that the cumulative revenue of the games of the kind is super low, and you're going to compete for a small share of the super small market. So the chances for you to earn anything are really low. You can't do that. I mean, it's a funny part that you can develop great games. It's where you live. But if you need to return the money you invest, or you need to pay salaries, or to report to investors, you need to be more aware.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Great. Well, I think it's about time to also to wrap it up and start introducing the next speaker. Max, thank you so much for the presentation. Everyone in the audience, thanks so much for the great questions. This was really a good way to round it off. And also, Max, if you want to add your contact details and leave them for everyone, I guess you can just type them in the public chat. And yeah, people can keep in touch with you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you all, and have a good one.
Thanks.